Today, we're digging into a doctoral thesis that puts forward a really challenging and deeply personal idea, that there's a systemic program out there designed to engineer and control Black masculinity. This isn't just about being pushed to the margins. The argument here is that it's about deliberate design, about programming, and, maybe most importantly, about a blueprint for how to take back control.
And this quote from the author, Donald Matthew Varnadoe, man, it really sets the stage. It tells you everything you need to know about the perspective here. This isn't just an academic paper. It's framed as an act of resistance. It's a story about cracking a code that was never meant to be cracked.
Okay, so here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start with the core hypothesis, then we'll trace the history the author lays out. After that, we'll see how this all plays out in his own life, connected to the modern world, and finally, we'll explore the solution he proposes for, well, rebuilding the self.
All right, first things first. What's the core hypothesis? What's the big idea that this entire thing is built on? So the author coins this term systemic grooming. And what he means by that is a set of really intentional long-term strategies. The alleged goal? It's not just about oppression in the way we usually think about it. It's about fundamentally changing the masculine signal of Black men, basically steering them toward being compliant or just silent.
So this whole idea is built on a few key arguments. First, the thesis says the Black male identity hasn't just been pushed aside. It's been actively programmed. And this idea of feminization in culture, the author argues it was no accident. It was strategic, almost like a theatrical production. He even looks back at historical violence, like lynchings, and reframes them, saying they were also about public sexual degradation, meant to humiliate. But here's the real kicker. The solution isn't just to rebel. The author says true freedom requires a complete re-architecture of the self, from the inside out.
Okay, so let's dig into the history a bit. The thesis argues that these control methods didn't just pop up overnight. Nope. They've been evolving for a long, long time.
This timeline really does a great job of showing what the author's getting at. He connects the dots from the raw physical violence of the Jim Crow era, framing lynchings as these rituals of sexual humiliation, and draws a straight line to the more symbolic violence of old Hollywood, where Black actors were so often put in these emasculated roles. And now, he argues, that same job is being done by social media algorithms.
And here you can see that comparison laid out, side by side. It's pretty stark. On one side, you've got physical domination through public, ritualized violence. On the other, you have symbolic domination through cultural images and stereotypes. The thesis is saying that even though the methods look completely different, one is brutal and physical, the other is cultural. The goal? It's been chillingly the same: control and neutralize what's seen as a threat.
Okay, this next part is where things get really personal, and maybe the most challenging part of the whole thesis. The author doesn't just analyze this system from a distance. Nope, he puts his own life right at the center of it, like a case study.
He calls himself a compliance test unit, and the idea here is wild, that his entire upbringing, his environment, the social pressures, even his own attractions, was basically a test run for the very system of grooming he's now taking apart.
And this quote, wow, it really gives you a sense of just how intense that experience was. He says he was raised in a place where, from the time he was 2, whiteness was the only game in town. The pressure to fit in wasn't just, social. It was about survival.
And this might be the most radical idea in the whole thesis. He argues that his own sexual desires weren't just organic. They were architected by his surroundings. Basically, that desire itself was used as a tool to assimilate him.
But here's the twist, and it's a really crucial one. He doesn't look back on this with shame. Instead, he sees that experience as the map. It's the very blueprint he needed. Because he lived inside the program, he learned how it works. He learned the code. And that's how he figured out how to rewrite it. His own life becomes the guide for how to resist.
So, okay, that's the history and the personal story. But how does this system supposedly work today? The thesis shifts gears here to look at the modern institutions that keep these protocols going, especially in the digital world and in academia.
This table breaks it down really well. So, you take social media. The claim is that algorithms are designed to reward you for being docile and to bury dissenting voices, leading to what he calls algorithmic compliance. Then you have academia. Here, praise and even the idea of inclusion are framed as ways to condition you, to silence real dissent, creating this groomed intellectual. And finally, sexuality, where cultural conditioning can shape desire itself to encourage assimilation.
All right, so we've heard the problem laid out in a lot of detail. So what's the solution? The final part of this work isn't just about critique. It's about a pretty radical proposal for how to rebuild yourself.
And it really boils down to this question, right? How do you break a system that's specifically designed to absorb you? If its main defense is to just pull you in and neutralize you, what do? Just rebelling might not be enough.
So the author's answer is to propose a whole new field of study, something he calls sovereign systems design. And this isn't just some abstract idea, it's meant to be a practical toolkit. It mashes up critical race theory with the logic you'd find in software architecture and modern digital tools, all with one goal: to actively build an identity that's independent of the system's influence.
And he breaks this rebuilding process down into 3 key steps. First up is self-recoding. The idea is to use tech like AI as a kind of sovereign mirror, a way to see yourself without the system's filter. The second step is reclaiming sovereignty, which is all about building a new internal structure for yourself that doesn't need anyone else's approval. And finally, designing culture. This means creating new tools, new AI that actually preserve and amplify who you are, instead of compressing you into a box.
And this quote, near the end of the work, just perfectly sums up this whole idea of a new self-architecture. It's not a finished product. It's dynamic, it's something you create, and you've got to keep working on it. It's a project that's never really done.
So, in the end, the whole thesis really leaves us chewing on this one big question. And look, whether you buy into all of its arguments or not, it really makes you think about the systems that shape all of us, the programming we might have taken on without even realizing it, and what it would actually mean for any of us to truly rewrite our own code.